It's 2020. After 5 years we finally got a card game that doesn't advocate for withdrawing basic human rights. Then again, how can I be so quick to praise this game when it contains shit like... So in the spirit of this game coming out, I'm gonna sell my soul and become an asshole. Here's a deck I got from a dude on Twitter, which means right now I'm a fucking plagiarist. The deck involves buffing your early game elusives with Inspiring Mentor and Omenhawk. If that wasn't enough to make you want to uninstall and go play Solitaire, a more balanced card game, this deck also contains the Inspiring Mentor and Zed combo. This makes Zed almost impossible to kill unless your enemy is running Black Spear or fucking Heimerdinger. So like, pretty much everybody. Stalking Wolf also fits well into this deck to deal with enemy elusives. Additionally, it fills up the enemy's bench with a card that they can't trade into elusives. So anyway, I queued up for a game, fearing the thought of me having to go up against the spider deck, for I have arachnophobia and can't get within 2 meters of anything with more than 7 legs. To my surprise, my first opponent was insignificant. His first aggressive move was to target my Green Glade duo, to which I responded with utter brutality. However, he soon after returned the favour. It was at this point, I was pissed. I made the most intellectual move I could have in a situation that possessed multiple outcomes. My opponent was quick to react by throwing their cards into a waste collection vehicle. Not the standard move you'd make in a card game. Unfortunately for me, his strategy worked, and he succeeded in beating the shit out of me by getting closer. I decided to make a move which would change the direction of this ongoing and brutal fight. Sadly, it did not work. Unlucky for my opponent, one of his birds fucking died. My enemy pushes me against a wall with nowhere to run, nor victory in sight. However determined, I pushed through to the end. And just like that, my opponent, with victory and accomplishment right before their eyes, fucking died to my hands on the battlefield. But this raises the question. Are elusive decks overpowered? I've seen numerous posts on the lore subreddit claiming this, even though actually I just filtered posts with the key term elusive deck to back up my point, but that's beyond my point. What my point is that people out there claim this to be too strong. So I thought the best way to identify whether this is true or not was to discover the average win rate of an elusive deck. This guy claims to have an 82% win rate, but this one single man isn't representative of the entire lore population. I'd calculate my own win rate of an elusive deck, but I'm not representative of the entire lore population. I tried asking Twitter, a site which is well known for being representative of the entire lore population, but no one fucking answered because no one knows who I am. So I thought I'd do the next best thing by comparing the typical elusive deck to another dominant deck type in the meta, with that being a deck based around Fearsome units. First of all, why is the typical Fearsome spider deck so strong? This would be the criteria I use to assess the strength of elusive units. For starters, the mean cost of the standard cards you'd find in a Fearsome deck is 3.5 mana. How typical for such an average deck. The low cost of such cards means that you can apply heavy early game pressure onto the board, which is especially effective when playing cards with the Fearsome attribute. This brings me on to my next point. The nature of these cards means that a lot of the time Fearsome decks will always dominate the early game. Trading into cards such as Precious Pet, Elise or Mistwraith is often impossible, resulting in applying a lot of early game damage to the Nexus. What makes Fearsome decks so strong is the fact that they can apply a limit to what can defend against them. So, are elusive cards OP? Kinda. There are some obvious similarities between an elusive deck type and the previous deck type I just discussed. For starters, the typical cards you'd use in an elusive deck have a low mean cost as well. You could argue that in the context of Legends of Runeterra, 1 more mana is quite a lot. Personally, I feel like this is a good trade for elusive's own defense limit. Similar to Fearsome units, elusive units can only be blocked under certain conditions. This means that elusive decks are free to hit the Nexus whenever, so long as the opponent isn't running elusive units themselves. This therefore allows Fearsome or elusive decks to run cards such as Brother's Bond, Might, and Elixir of Wrath to deal an overwhelming amount of damage to the Nexus. The only thing that can counter an elusive type deck is Control or Challenger. But that's the thing, this deck does have counters. It's not impossible to beat. A good control deck with some lucky early game draws can shut down the early game of an elusive deck really hard. Similarly, a challenger deck can remove elusives without difficulty by forcing them to fight. This deck isn't some ascended shit which has no weaknesses. So in conclusion, personally I feel that in the context of Legends of Runeterra and its meta right now, an elusive deck is kinda OP. However, there are counters such as control or challenger decks which can give it a difficult time. So if I'm calling this deck type OP, then what are some of my proposed nerfs? Well, I'm not really a good hypothetical game balancer, but I have some sort of idea that a lot of you might not agree with. If the gimmick behind elusive units is that they can attack the Nexus without interruption, then I feel like there should be a cap on the amount of damage they can do to the Nexus. There have been so many games I've been in where it just ends in a couple of rounds because the enemy elusives have been buffed to no end and they just win. I know a lot will argue against this since cards that can buff units complement elusives nicely, but it's not nice when this fucking card has 1 million attack damage and overheals the Nexus. I don't really have any more proposed nerfs. I feel like anything I come up with will be fairly flawed and unreasonable anyway because I'm not that good at creating these hypothetical nerfs. However, I do think there's something all of us can agree on. Remove this fucking dumb, stupid card. I'm uninstalling this fucking worst card yet.